Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak from India. We are delighted to welcome Professor Noam Samir, Associate Professor of Operations Strategy at the Kohler School of Management, Tel Aviv University, as our distinguished guest on today's podcast episode. Professor Samir's research centers on supply chain management and platform economics, with a focus on information acquisition, incentives for information sharing, the economics of information technology, and contracting in supply chains. Dr. Samir's work has been published in leading academic journals such as Management Science, Manufacturing and Service Operations Management, Marketing Science, and Production and Operations Management. Prior to his current role, he was a visiting scholar at the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University, and held a visiting position at Yeshiva University in New York City. Dr. Noam earned his PhD in business from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, as well as MS in Statistics from Stanford University. He also holds an MS in Operations Research and a BS in Computer Science and Management, both from Tel Aviv University. In this episode, Professor Noam Samir shares insightful perspectives from his research study, Sales Information Transparency and Trust in Repeated Vertical Relationships. It's my pleasure to now welcome Professor Noam Samir to the conversation. Professor Noam, it is a privilege to have you with us today, and we deeply appreciate your graciously acceptance of our invitation.
Deepak, thank you very much for this very nice introduction and for the opportunity to be a guest in your podcast. I had the opportunity to listen to a few of the other episodes. They were all extremely insightful and interesting, and I hope that this episode will be as well.
Thank you. Professor, what first motivated you to explore the link between information transparency, trust, and repeated interactions in vertical relationships between manufacturers and retailers?
So I've been doing research in this area for more than 15 years now. And it actually started with my PhD studies. And during my PhD studies, when I thought about what type of research I want to do and what is the areas that I want to pursue, we met with one executive, and he told us, me and my advisor, and he told us the following story. So he was an executive in a major telecom company, and every 3 to 5 years, they received a bid for a contract from a major customer. And this executive told us that every time that they received this contract, they knew that they must win this contract for two main reasons. One is that this is a strategic customer for this company. And second, this company set the ground for the future technologies that will be used in the market. And then when they opened the new bid, they were actually very, very surprised. They saw a mandatory request for a technology that they didn't have at all. And they tried to think, well, how can we answer this contract? There is a piece of technology which is very important, and we don't have it available for us in our company. So they started looking around, and they found a relatively young startup that had exactly what the customer was looking for. So initially, they were very happy. I will try to frame it later on as from efficiency perspective, we can provide the product and it will increase the efficiency of our product. But then after they gave it another thought, they also started to become a little bit worried. And why they became a bit worried? Because they didn't know how much information they want to expose to both the strategic customer and actually to the startup. What do I mean? So they didn't want to expose to the customer, or they didn't know whether they should expose to the customer that this critical piece of technology is actually coming not from them, but actually from a relatively young startup. Well, how would the customer actually react to this information? And they also didn't know whether they want to reveal to this startup that the technologies that they want to adopt from them is so critical to this strategic customer, because maybe the startup will raise the price even more. Or alternatively, maybe the startup will think maybe we can negotiate directly with this customer without this company. So all of this issue opened my eyes. So this is because most of the products that we today bring to the market are developed and manufactured by a series of companies. And they're independent companies. They have sometimes they have misaligned incentives. So how do we increase efficiency in these markets? How do we build trust? How do we make sure that information flows in such supply chain? So this is the way I started this journey of my research, which is still been, and after 15 years, still the focus of my research is still in the area of building trust and sharing information within supply chains.
Professor, in your model, past sales information does not improve demand prediction but still plays a strategic role. Could you explain why that distinction is important?
Yeah. So in most of the research, people share information or share past information because it improves future prediction capabilities. This is kind of the notions that people used in the past. So you gather information, and based on this information, you make prediction about the future. But in this research, what we wanted to achieve, we wanted to highlight the strategic role of sharing past information. And for this purpose, we said, okay, let's think about a situation in which past information does not affect our ability to predict the future demand. And this can happen if, for example, demand fluctuates for period to period, demand is exactly the same. So having knowledge about what was the demand in the previous season will not improve my ability to predict the demand in the next period. So demand does not improve prediction capabilities. However, let me explain a bit the setting and why information still plays a very important role in this case. So in our case, let's assume a very simple supply chain. We have, like in the examples that I talked about, let's assume that we have one manufacturer and we have another, and this manufacturer sells via a retailer. And we have a division of power, I would say. So the manufacturer, this is the brand name. So the manufacturer has the power to dictate the terms of the contract. So this will be the manufacturer. But demand in each period, it fluctuates between two options. Either the market is going to be well or high, or the market is going to be low. So these are the two options. And each period is the same. We draw a demand. Either the demand will be high or low with a known probability. And the retailer, because the retailer is closer to the consumers, interact with the consumers, let's assume that the retailer actually has the ability to observe what is the realization of the demand. Meaning, in each period, first, the retailer observe whether the demand is high or low, and then we play this game, and it continues again and again and again. So in our setting, why does past information actually affect the efficiency? So in a traditional game like this, when the manufacturer needs to determine the terms of the contract, he designs a menu of contracts. What does it mean, a menu of contract? I will be the manufacturer for a second, and I design a contract such that when demand is high, contract A will be chosen, and when demand is low, contract B will be chosen. And because the retailer knows what is the demand, he will choose either contract A or contract B. And I, as the manufacturer, need to make sure that the manufacturer will choose the correct contract. And so how can I make sure that this will happen? So there are two levels that I can use. The first one is I want to make sure that if demand is high, the retailer will choose contract A. So contract A is more favorable compared to contract B when demand is high. And vice versa. When demand is low, I want to make sure that contract B is chosen and not contract A. So how can I make sure that this happens? So two levels. I can take contract B and make it less attractive. This can be one option. And another option, I can take contract A and make it a little bit more attractive for the retailer. And this is actually what is happening when there is no repeated interaction and when there is no information. And so we are trying to make sure that we separate between these two contracts. And what is the role now of information, how it improves efficiency? When information is shared, actually, I the retailer shows the manufacturer whether demand was either high or low. So instead of using the tool of the contract to infer whether demand is high or low, we are using the tool of past sales information in order to make this inference. As a result, when I do not need the contract to tell me whether demand is high or low, I can make the contract a little more efficient. I will not get into all the technical details, but I can now, I do not need to separate between these two options to such a degree. So by revealing whether demand is high or low, I can now increase the overall efficiency of these contracts and also overall the efficiency of the market.
Professor, how does repeated interaction alone, even without sharing sales information, help improve channel efficiency and mutual profits?
This is a very good question. So, when we do not interact repeatedly, we have only one option for me and you to interact. And you now will be the manufacturer. You are designing now the contracts. And as I said, you want to make sure that you separate these contracts enough such that I will choose the correct one. And when you are separating between them, what is well known in economics that, as I said, we are losing some efficiency. We are losing some efficiency. But now let's think about what happens when we have repeated interaction. When we have repeated interaction, now you are telling yourself, I will meet with Noam not only once, but not only twice, but I will meet with Noam again and again and again and again. As a result, you want to improve the efficiency of these contracts, which is, of course, something good. So you increase the surplus. But at the same time, you are a little bit afraid. Why are you afraid? Because you're afraid that if you improve the efficiency of these contracts, maybe Noam, instead of choosing contract A, Noam now will move and choose contract B because now contract B is a little bit more attractive. So you want to increase the efficiency, but you still at the same time, you want to make sure that these two contracts are separate enough such that Noam will choose the correct one. And how do you do so? You increase the efficiency of this contract by producing more in the market. This is the good outcome. But at the same time, you are increasing the price that you are charging to such extent that sometimes my payoff is actually negative. When we are contracting only once, I will not accept a contract where that will give me a negative payoff. However, when we are contracting again and again and again, I will tell myself, maybe today I'm willing to accept a contract that will give me a negative payoff. But why will I do it? I will do it because you will promise me that in the future you will give me a much better terms when, for example, when demand is actually high. So when demand is low, you will give me a negative payoff, but you will compensate me when demand is actually high to such extent that overall I will prefer this situation. Meaning that you will use the mechanism of repeated interaction to increase the set of possible contracts such that the overall efficiency in the market is improved.
Professor, the paper discusses how sharing past sales data can build trust between channel partners. How would you translate that findings into a practical managerial data?
So this is an important question. Even before we get to this answer, my research is I develop theoretical models, but I want to believe that based on this theoretical model, we can get some managerial insights that are practical. For example, in this case, for this paper, we talked about the fact that by having repeated interaction and sharing information, we're able to improve significantly the overall efficiency of the market and make both the manufacturer and the retailer better off. So the main takeaway, I would say, is when you are designing a supply chain, try to find a partner that you can work with repeatedly. This is the first thing. And then once you found this partner, invest in technology. And the technology that you want to invest in this case is sharing information. So make sure that information can flow from the retailer to the manufacturer. And actually, when we are thinking about this this is a very big task because we're talking about sharing intimate information from the retailer's perspective, point of sales information, all the sales information, and providing it to the manufacturer. It will happen only if there is a repeated interaction and we trust each other. But the gains that we'll have is that we're able to increase the efficiency of the supply chain.
Professor, you found that the retailers' incentives to share information depends on how much it values future profits. Could you unpack that behavior dynamics?
Yeah. So first, let's try to understand what it means to future profits. So in this type of relationship, when we have a repeated interaction, we are looking at what are our immediate payoffs, what will be our payoffs in the current season, and also we are taking into consideration what will be our payoffs in future periods. And usually we like our immediate payoffs more than what we want, more than our future payoffs. So there is some kind of weight that we are putting on the future payoffs, and usually future payoffs are a little bit less important compared to our immediate payoffs. Think also about, for example, we prefer to receive money today than to receive the same amount of money tomorrow. So this is the way first we think about repeated interaction. And what we see is that due to the repeated interaction, as I explained before, we're able to increase of first the overall efficiency of the supply chain. But there is another thing that is happening here. When the retailer appreciates the future a lot, it gives higher bargaining power to the manufacturer. And as a result, what happens is that when we first increase the overall efficiency, but now we need to decide how we allocate this surplus between the manufacturer and the retailer. So when the retailer appreciates the future payoffs a lot, actually it gives a higher bargaining power to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer will take much of the surplus to himself. So what we're actually showing in this paper is that the retailer is better off by sharing information when he appreciates the future, but not by too much. That's what I would say.
Professor, financial constraints are usually viewed as a weaknesses. Yet your study suggests they may sometimes favor the retailer. How should firms interpret that paradox?
Yeah. So usually we like to think about financial constraint as, of course, as something negative. We don't have enough money. But in this paper, again, what we are the main discussion is how do we increase efficiency and how do we allocate the surplus that is generated. And the surplus that is being generated is being allocated by the bargaining power of the manufacturer compared to the retailer. And when the retailer doesn't have any financial constraint, as also we discussed, in some cases, what the manufacturer will offer the retailer is a contract in which sometimes it will give the retailer negative payoff in some periods. And as I said, the retailer is willing to accept this negative payoffs because he also expects to get higher payoffs in other periods. But such a thing gives a lot of bargaining power to the manufacturer. However, if the retailer has a financial constraints, what do we mean by a financial constraint? In our research, we interpreted financial constraints as the fact that the retailer cannot accept negative payoffs in any period. So basically, what it does, it limits the set of options for the manufacturer because it cannot offer anymore negative payoffs for our retailer. So if the manufacturer has a very high bargaining power and without financial constraint, he will push the retailer toward accepting these negative payoffs. Now, once we add these financial constraint, we are limiting the set of possible outcomes for the manufacturer and actually making the retailer's situation better off.
Professor, to what extent do you think noisy or imperfect information, rather than full transparency, can still support trust and cooperation in real markets?
So this is also a very good question. So let me explain a little bit what we happened in our model, and then we'll try to translate it into reality. So in our model, we looked at the situation in which, as we discussed earlier, the retailer provides past sales information to the manufacturer. And what we said is that increases the overall efficiency of the market, but it also gives some bargaining power, extra bargaining power, I would say, to the manufacturer, which in sometimes can make the retailer worse off. Worse. And then we said, okay, so maybe the retailer will not provide perfect information to the manufacturer. So instead of telling the manufacturer demand is high or demand is low, he will give imprecise information. What is imprecise information? He will tell him there is some probability, which is known, that the market will be high, and there's for some probability that actually I have a mistake and demand is actually low. So, and what we are actually showing in this paper, and I also want to extend it to something even bigger, is that sometimes having this ability of imprecise or a strategic ambiguity, I would say, makes the situation better off. Why? Because having information is better, but I don't want to provide to the manufacturer extra bargaining power. So by limiting the amount of information, I can kind of balance between my desire to increase the efficiency of the supply chain and limiting the bargaining power of my manufacturer. And let me try now try to connect it into real market, as you said. So we try to think about this issue. Do we observe such behavior in a real market? So I would like to give a few examples that I think so. So what is strategic ambiguity in real markets? So let's start not from supply chain, actually from call centers. So sometimes we call a call center and we get the following information. The waiting time is longer than average, for example. So I would argue that this is an example for imprecise information, because actually the company knows what is the expected waiting time, I guess. They know that you are 42 in line. They know what is the average service time. So we can kind of calculate what should be your expected waiting time. But they do not provide you the expected waiting times. They just provide you some strategic ambiguity. So it's longer than the average, but we do not provide the exact amount of time. Also, in different settings, we see that companies provide customers with information such as inventory is running low, buy now, for example. So it's also strategic ambiguity because the company does not provide the exact information to the customers. They just say, okay, we have limited amount of inventory. Maybe you should, as a customer, you should consider and buy the product. Another example, a platform uh, provides its sellers with forecast information. And in many instances, what we saw, they will not provide the exact maybe parameters that they have, but will say they will say demand is either low or medium or high. So there's some sort of strategic ambiguity. So we provide our receivers of the information with strategic ambiguity. And why does it happen? So to be honest, I think there can be many reasons for this. Because I think this issue is that companies also understand that when you share information, sometimes sharing precise information will give the receiver too much power. So you understand that you want to provide information, but not too much information, which is also what we see in the setting of this paper.
How might digital technologies and data platforms influence this dynamics of information sharing and repeated contracting today?
Ah, right. So now let's move from a general supply chain, let's say, into the new economy of platforms, etc. So today, when talking about platform, actually, it's a very unique situation in which we have many different sellers. They're all connected to one platform. The platform, due to AI capabilities, etc., is able to gather large quantities of data. And the platform is also able to, of course, to analyze this data and generate relatively precise forecast information. So I think this is kind of a very unique situation in economy. We never had a situation in which one entity had the ability to look at all the different sellers in the market, understand the market very well, and generate a precise forecast, for example, such as today what platforms are doing. But with this power comes great questions as well. Because, for example, one question that we can ask is, should the platform provide such information to all the different sellers? And when I'm asking should also define what is this should? Should the platform, based on the incentives of the platform, so is it good for the platform to share information? This is one question. Another question that we can think about is it good for the society? The platform will be able to gather this data, analyze this data, and share this information with the sellers. Is it good for the sellers? So there are many different questions from many different perspectives that we can adopt. I'm sorry. Another question that you can ask for digital platform, should the platform provide information to all the sellers, or alternatively discriminate between some sellers? For example, I will provide information to only a subset of my preferred sellers, and I will not provide information to another subset of my sellers. Is it good for society? Is it bad? Is it legal? Yeah, sorry. All of these questions.
Professor, what implications do your findings have for designing contracts or incentives that balance power and cooperation across supply chain partners?
Another very important question. So I think what we see in this research and also in general is that there are a few factors that we need to take into consideration. The first one is how do we increase the efficiency of the supply chain, meaning what types of contracts and what types of incentives will allow us to increase the overall efficiency of the supply chain. So this will be the kind of the first question. And then the second question is how do we allocate the surplus that we're able to generate between the different parties in the supply chain? And these are two very different questions. And when we are trying to design contracts and incentives, we need to take into consideration these two issues: efficiency and allocation of surplus. And when we are thinking about different contracts, we should ask ourselves first, is this contract achieves the goal of efficiency? And second, is this contract allow us to share this surplus based on relative market conditions, such as what is the market power of the manufacturer versus the retailer? So I would say that a good contract first achieves, of course, the efficiency goal. And second, it gives you the freedom to allocate the surplus according to any criteria that you want. And what we see in some instances that maybe we will prefer to use a contract that does not maximize the efficiency in the market, but it still gives us the freedom to allocate some surplus, maybe not the entire surplus, but some surplus. It allows us to allocate it freely between the different firms in the supply chain.
Professor Samir, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question.
Oh.
Looking ahead, what open questions remain in understanding how trust evolves through data sharing in vertical business relationships.
Uh, so I think this issue of trust and information sharing, it's a very interesting and important aspect in modern economy. So we talked about this issue that it's not only a regular supply chain or traditional supply chain, I would say, but today we're talking about digital supply chain. We're talking about platforms, and this whole issue of information is becoming more and more, I think, even important today. Because as I mentioned before, you have this situation in which you have, let's say, a platform that is able to look at the entire market. It's able to gather large quantities of data and analyze them, and therefore questions that we didn't ask in the past, we should ask today. So some of these questions we asked during this episode. Another question that we can ask is if the platform shares information with its sellers, will it try to achieve collusion at the expense of the customers, for example? This is another very important, very important question. Another important question is not only from the, so I'm mainly developing theoretical models, but if you're talking about information sharing, we should also talk about behavioral aspects. So we talked about this issue of trust, but behavioral aspects influence a lot this issue of trust. So, for example, there is a lot of research that talks about Japanese supply chains and the fact that they appreciate a lot repeated interaction, trust, cooperation versus, let's say, American supply chains that behave differently. So, how do cultural aspects also affect trust? So, this is also a very important aspect of this research area as well.
It's been a pleasure to having you on the show, Professor Samir. Your insights into trust, transparency, and information sharing in manufacturer-retailer relationships shed lights on the how strategic collaborations can enhance efficiency and long-term value. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your research perspective with our listeners.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Deepak.